The alien fleet, once so confident in its invincibility, had been thrown into chaos. The human ship, despite its underdog status, had proven itself more resilient, more resourceful than the aliens had anticipated. As their ships creaked under pressure and their once dominant formation shattered, the alien commanders found themselves scrambling to regain control. Zahn, the captain of the flagship, stood alone in the command center, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. The humans, the very species they had laughed at, had turned the tide of this war. "This can't be happening," Zahn muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He turned sharply to his first officer, a tall, thin alien with dark eyes that mirrored his own anxiety. "They've breached the forward defenses, Captain," the officer reported, his voice tight. "Several of our ships are disabled, and our rear fleet is struggling to regroup." The human ship's new tactics, agility combined with advanced weaponry, are catching us off guard. Zahn's eyes flashed with frustration, but he quickly regained control of his emotions. He had never been one to show weakness in front of his crew, even in the face of adversity. However, this situation was unlike anything he had encountered before. The human ship's sudden resistance wasn't just about firepower. It was about their sheer will to survive, something the aliens hadn't accounted for. "What are their weaknesses?" Zahn asked, his voice low but intense. The first officer hesitated, glancing over the data feeds that showed the ongoing battle. "Their ship is heavily damaged. Their shields are not as strong as ours, and their engines are operating at reduced capacity. If we focus all our firepower on one weak point, we could take them down." Zahn nodded, but a thought lingered in his mind. What if the humans had something more up their sleeve? Their hidden weapon had already stunned his fleet once. The ability to adapt and turn the tide of battle had been the human strength. And that strength had now turned the once sure victory into an unpredictable struggle. He took a deep breath and faced his crew. "We will not be outwitted by these creatures. The time has come for us to play our final hand. Prepare the weapon systems. I want every ship in formation. We break them or we destroy them. There are no other options." Back on the human ship, Captain Alvarez stood at the front of the bridge, his gaze fixed on the dark void of space ahead. The alien fleet, though battered, was not yet defeated. They had retreated to regroup, but Alvarez knew it was only a matter of time before they came back with everything they had. This was the moment that would define the future of humanity. He had to make the right call. "Status report?" Alvarez asked, his voice steady but laced with a hint of concern. "Shields are holding at 55%, Captain," Lieutenant Johnson replied, his fingers flying across the control panels. "We've repaired most of the external damage, but the ship's systems are still under strain." "We can't keep this up forever," Alvarez nodded. "What's our weapon status?" "All primary weapons are online," Lieutenant Harris reported. "However, the secondary weapon system, the one we used earlier, is still offline. We're going to need time to bring it back online." Alvarez felt the weight of their situation pressing down on him. They had fought valiantly so far, but he knew the odds were quickly stacking against them. The alien fleet was vast, and their ships were far more powerful. Yet, there was one thing that kept Alvarez from giving in to despair: the crew. They had already exceeded expectations by surviving this long. And now, they had a chance to win. "Prepare for the next wave," Alvarez ordered. "We've faced the impossible before, and we'll do it again." The crew sprang into action, ready to fight until their last breath. Outside, the alien ships were reassembling, their massive warships once again taking their positions in perfect synchronization. It was clear that Zahn's forces were preparing for something big, something that could end the battle once and for all. Zahn's flagship surged forward, a massive behemoth in the blackness of space, its weapons charging with intensity. It was an intimidating sight, but Alvarez didn't flinch. This wasn't the first time he had faced seemingly insurmountable odds. "All systems prepared, Captain," Lieutenant Johnson called. "We're ready for whatever they throw at us." "Then, let's make it count," Alvarez replied, his eyes focused on the alien fleet ahead. "Bring everything to bear. We have to hit them hard and fast." The human ship powered forward, its weapons blazing as it fired on the advancing alien fleet. The two forces collided in a shower of sparks and explosions. The human ship was outgunned, but it moved with precision and agility, darting in, out of the alien fire. The battle had become a deadly dance of movement and firepower, with neither side willing to give an inch. For a moment, it seemed as if the human ship might prevail. The aliens were no longer laughing, no longer certain of their victory. The human ship had proven that it could hold its ground, and the alien fleet had begun to show signs of straying. But just as the human ship landed a devastating blow on an alien cruiser, Zan's flagship unleashed a new weapon. A massive energy blast shot out from the alien ship, hitting the human ship with devastating force. The ship shook violently as the blast tore through its shields, sending sparks flying in every direction. "Shields at 30%, Lieutenant Johnson shouted. "Hull integrity is failing. We've taken heavy damage to the port side. Report." Alvarez snapped, gripping the console in front of him. "We've lost one of the main engines," Lieutenant Harris replied, her voice tight with tension. "We can't sustain this level of fire. We need to retreat or we won't make it out of here." Alvarez stood still, his mind racing. They were facing the worst possible situation. The aliens were about to land the final blow, but there was no retreat. Not for him, not for the crew. They had come too far to back down now. "We don't retreat," Alvarez said, his voice low and determined. "We fight." The human ship pressed forward, firing its weapons with desperation. Every blast sent shockwaves through space, every shot a plea for survival. The alien fleet, however, was relentless. Zan's flagship fired again, and this time, the blast hit the human ship's main reactor. "Critical damage," Lieutenant Johnson cried. "We're losing power to the entire starboard side. If we don't do something, get us to that flagship." Alvarez interrupted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're taking the fight to them." The human ship, battered and broken, veered toward Zan's flagship. It was a suicidal maneuver, a desperate attempt to cripple the alien leadership before they were all destroyed. The crew knew the risks, but they also knew that this was their final chance. They had to hit the aliens at their core. The alien fleet responded by tightening its formation, preparing for a final push. But it was too late. The human ship, now barely functional, surged forward, weapons blazing. The crew, their faces set in grim determination, fired everything they had left. The alien flagship's shields began to falter as the human ship's concentrated fire tore through its defenses. Zan, standing in the command center of his flagship, realized that he had underestimated the human ship once again. "What are they doing?" Zan shouted. "They're charging straight at us." In those final moments, the human ship's desperate assault caught the alien fleet off guard. The energy blasts from the human ship's weapons tore through the alien flagship's outer shields and struck its vulnerable core. For the first time in this battle, the alien flagship's weapons faltered, and its systems began to fail. "We've got them," Lieutenant Harris yelled, a note of triumph in her voice. Alvarez didn't allow himself to celebrate. The battle wasn't over yet, but the balance of power had shifted once again. The alien fleet was retreating, their flagship severely damaged. And in the background, the once dominant force in the galaxy was realizing that the humans were no longer the underdogs. They were the ones in control. The aliens had thought they could win this war with ease. But they were wrong. The humans were proving that sometimes the greatest strength lay not in sheer numbers, but in the ability to adapt, to fight against all odds. And for the first time in a long time, Zahn, the alien captain, found himself questioning his very beliefs. In that moment, humanity was not just surviving, it was conquering. The battle began in silence, the calm before the storm. The alien fleet hovered in the vastness of space, their ships like dark shadows against the stars. There were hundreds of them, massive warships brimming with advanced technology. They had come to destroy the human ship, and they were certain of their victory. The human ship was nothing more than a speck in the distance, a tiny target ready to be wiped out. On board the alien flagship, the captain stood before the giant viewing window, watching the human ship through the glass. It was small, fragile-looking, compared to the towering warships of the alien fleet. The captain let out a harsh laugh, his voice booming throughout the room. "This will be easier than I thought," he said, turning to his crew. The aliens had fought many battles across the galaxy, and they had never been defeated. Their weapons were far superior to anything the humans could muster. They had studied the human ships and knew their weaknesses. The captain's laughter echoed through the flagship as the fleet advanced. On board the human ship, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and vastly outclassed. Yet, there was no fear in their eyes. They had been trained for this, and they knew they had no choice but to fight. Captain Alvarez, the leader of the human ship, stood at the helm, his hands tightly gripping the controls. His face was grim but determined. "Ready yourselves," he called to his crew. "We may be small, but we're not going down without a fight." The first attack came without warning. A bright flash of light exploded from the alien fleet, hitting the human ship with devastating force. The ship shook violently, and alarms blared across the control room. Sparks flew from the walls, and crew members scrambled to maintain control, shielding at 30%. Shouted one of the engineers, panic creeping into his voice. "Activate countermeasures," Captain Alvarez ordered, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "Deploy evasive maneuvers." The human ship twisted and turned, narrowly avoiding another barrage of laser fire. The crew worked in perfect harmony, responding to each new threat as if they had practiced it 1,000 times. Despite the damage, the ship wasn't done. It continued to fight, stubbornly holding its ground against the seemingly unstoppable alien forces. Outside, the alien ships watched with amusement. The human ship was struggling, its shields flickering under the pressure. Yet, to the aliens, this was just a brief show of resistance. They believed the battle was already won. The captain of the flagship laughed again, this time louder than before. "They think they can survive this? How laughable," he sneered. "Prepare for the final blow. Let's end this quickly." With that command, the alien fleet unleashed their full power. The human ship, battered and weakened, was struck again. Sparks flew from the hull, and the lights inside flickered. Crew members scrambled to stay on their feet as the ship groaned under the assault. "Shield failure imminent," cried one of the officers. Captain Alvarez didn't hesitate. He knew they couldn't survive much longer unless they did something drastic. He glanced at his communications officer, who nodded grimly, signaling that the ship's last resort was ready. "Activate the hidden weapon," Captain Alvarez ordered. His voice was low, barely audible over the chaos of the battle. The communications officer swiftly tapped a series of keys, and a low hum filled the room. On the outside of the ship, hidden beneath layers of armor, a strange device powered up. It had been designed as a last-ditch effort, something no one had ever expected the human ship to need. But now, as the alien fleet closed in for the kill, the crew had no choice but to use it. The weapon fired. A brilliant beam of energy shot out from the human ship, piercing the blackness of space. The blast was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen before. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a force of nature. The alien ships, for the first time in the battle, hesitated. The beam hit the lead alien ship squarely in the center, causing it to reel back. The aliens had never expected such a powerful response. "What is that?" shouted the captain of the flagship, his voice filled with disbelief. The crew of the alien flagship scrambled to understand what was happening. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humans were supposed to be weak, easy to destroy. The alien fleet had underestimated them. The weapon had caught them completely off guard, and for a brief moment, they found themselves vulnerable. The human crew cheered in the control room, their spirits lifting. But they knew it wasn't over yet. The alien fleet was still overwhelming in size, and the battle was far from won. "Prepare for counterattack," Captain Alvarez said, his voice steady. "We're not done yet." Outside, the alien ships quickly regrouped, adjusting their strategy. The laughter of the alien captain faded as he realized something. The human ship, though damaged, wasn't finished. It was still fighting, and it had just shown the aliens that they weren't as invincible as they thought. The captain of the flagship, now grim-faced, turned to his officers. "Don't underestimate them again," he said. "This battle is far from over." Inside the human ship, the crew prepared for whatever came next. They had made their first strike, but they knew the real challenge was yet to come. The alien fleet wasn't going to let them off easy, and the fight for survival had only just begun. As the two fleets faced off in the cold expanse of space, the tension was palpable. The aliens, once so sure of their victory, were now uncertain. The humans had given them something to think about, and that, in itself, was a victory. But the real question remained: would the human ship survive the coming onslaught, or was this only the beginning of a battle they could not win? The fate of the human crew was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: they weren't going down without a fight. The alien fleet had underestimated the human ship, and for the first time, they were beginning to doubt their certainty of victory. What should have been a quick and easy conquest had turned into a perplexing struggle. The alien flagship, once full of laughter and confident commands, now felt the weight of unease. Captain Zahn, leader of the alien forces, stood before the viewing window, watching the small human vessel struggle to stay afloat in the cosmic void. "I told you," Zahn growled to his officers, his voice sharp. "Underestimate them no more." On board the human ship, Captain Alvarez knew that the weapon they had just deployed had given them a temporary edge, but it wasn't enough. The alien fleet was still powerful, still vast, and they had many more weapons at their disposal. The sudden shock of the energy beam had momentarily thrown the aliens off balance, but this would not last forever. It was a small victory won. That would mean nothing if they couldn't follow it up with something more decisive. As the alarms stopped blaring, the control room grew eerily quiet. The crew was working quickly to repair systems and tend to the damage caused by the alien attack. But there was no time to rest. Every moment counted. "Damage reports?" Captain Alvarez asked, turning to his chief engineer, Lieutenant Johnson, who was busy typing rapidly on the control panel. "We've lost 2 of the external shields, Captain. Internal systems are strained, but we've got power running to most of the critical systems." "It'll hold for now," Johnson said, his voice calm despite the situation. "How long until the next assault?" Alvarez asked, feeling the weight of the moment press down on him. "Minutes, Captain," Lieutenant Harris, the communications officer, said. With urgency, the alien fleet is preparing to re-engage. Captain Alvarez nodded grimly. They had to act quickly, or their small victory would be meaningless. The weapon they had just used, an energy beam capable of piercing the strongest of shields, wasn't something they could deploy frequently. It was a one-time use, an all-or-nothing gamble that had paid off. But now, they had nothing left to hold the aliens at bay. Then, Alvarez remembered something he had kept in reserve. A backup plan. A secret weapon that had been built into the ship's design, but never tested in battle, until now. "Prepare." "The secondary weapon systems," Alvarez ordered, his voice steady despite the fear building in his chest. "Initiate the hidden protocol." The crew exchanged uncertain glances. The secondary weapon system had been created by the human engineers as a last-ditch effort, designed to catch any enemy off guard. It was a massive, devastating system, but its use had always been deemed too risky. The technology had been untested, and its destructive potential was unimaginable. "You sure about this, Captain?" Lieutenant Johnson asked hesitantly. "It's our only chance," Alvarez replied, his eyes fixed on the view screen as the alien ships slowly began to shift their formation. The hidden weapon system was a top-secret project that had been in development long before Alvarez had taken command of the human ship. It was known only to a select few, and its purpose was to give humanity a fighting chance against the overwhelming power of the alien invaders. It was based on a concept that had been theorized for years but never perfected until now. The weapon, unlike anything the aliens had encountered before, had the power to manipulate gravitational forces in a localized area, creating singularity-like phenomena. But there was a catch. The weapon was experimental, and its effects on the ship itself were unknown. It could be the key to victory, but it could also tear the ship apart in the process. "Initiating the core stabilization sequence," Lieutenant Harris said, his fingers moving with precision over the controls. The room was filled with the quiet hum of the ship's machinery as the crew worked swiftly to bring the weapon online. Outside, the alien fleet was preparing for their next strike. The humans had been dealt a blow, but they had also delivered one in return. Zahn's fleet was ready to finish what they had started, confident that the human ship could not survive much longer. Yet, in the back of Zahn's mind, there was something unsettling about this fight. The humans had revealed a weapon they hadn't anticipated. It was too late to change their strategy now, but something inside Zahn told him that this would not be as easy as he had originally thought. Back inside the human ship, Captain Alvarez waited, his gaze never leaving the view screen. The tension in the room was palpable, and the crew knew they were on the brink of something big. "Weapon systems online," Lieutenant Johnson reported. "Core stabilization achieved." "We're ready, Captain." "Fire the weapon," Alvarez ordered, his voice unwavering. The crew hit the final sequence of buttons, and the weapon's core fired up. The room trembled as energy began to build, swirling through the ship's systems like a storm waiting to break. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the weapon activated. The ship's exterior was suddenly engulfed in a wave of energy, cascading outwards in a spherical shockwave. The alien fleet, unprepared for such an event, was momentarily thrown into chaos. The gravitational field that the human weapon had unleashed twisted space itself, creating small but devastating anomalies that threw the alien ships off course. For a moment, the alien ships began to spin uncontrollably, pulled by the gravitational forces at play. Their shields flared with the stress of the sudden fluctuations in space, and several ships collided with each other in their desperate attempts to stabilize. "Direct hit on multiple vessels," Lieutenant Harris shouted. "They're losing control." Outside, the alien fleet was thrown into disarray. The shockwave had destabilized their formation, and several of their larger ships were now struggling to regain their positioning. Some were caught in the gravitational anomalies, their hulls creaking as the energy tore at their shields. Inside the human ship, the crew watched in stunned silence as the chaos unfolded before them. They had done it. They had hit the aliens harder than they could have imagined. But Captain Alvarez knew this was only the beginning. The aliens were powerful, and they wouldn't go down easily. "Get ready for a counterattack," Alvarez said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "This won't last long." Sure enough, the alien fleet quickly regained some control. Their flagship, the largest of all the ships, was the first to recover. Zahn's voice came over the communication lines, now colder than ever, "You've made your move, humans," Zan sneered. "But you're running out of time. We will not be so easily defeated." Alvarez knew the battle wasn't over, but he also knew that they had gained a significant advantage. The hidden weapon had done its job. The alien fleet was no longer certain of their victory, and that gave the human ship a fighting chance. "Prepare for the next phase," Alvarez ordered. "We fight to the end. We don't give up now." The crew nodded, their faces set with resolve. The human ship had delivered a blow, and they weren't going to stop until the battle was won. Outside, the alien fleet, still recovering from the effects of the gravitational weapon, began to regroup. They were angry, they were determined, and they were coming back with a vengeance. But so were the humans. As the two fleets prepared for the next round, the galaxy held its breath. The fight for survival was far from over, but one thing was clear. The human ship had proven it wasn't just a speck in the vastness of space. It was a force to be reckoned with. The tension was thick and the outcome uncertain. But for the first time, the aliens were no longer laughing. The battle between the alien fleet and the human ship had entered a new phase. The tide was beginning to shift, though neither side knew exactly how much longer the war would last. Captain Alvarez stood at the helm, watching the chaos unfold. On the view screen, the gravitational weapon they had activated had caused a massive disruption in the alien fleet, but it wasn't enough to secure victory. The aliens were regrouping, and it was only a matter of time before they would come at them with full force again. The question on everyone's mind was, could the human ship hold out long enough to land a decisive blow? Inside the control room, the crew worked with a sense of urgency. The damage from the previous attacks had been significant, and many systems were still running at minimal power. But the crew was resilient, and they had proven time and time again that they could adapt under pressure. They were no longer facing the seemingly unstoppable alien force. The playing field was more level now, and they could fight back. "How much longer until we're fully operational?" Captain Alvarez asked, his voice steady despite the growing pressure. "Another 15 minutes, Captain," Lieutenant Johnson replied, his eyes glued to the control panel. "But we'll be functional enough to continue the fight now. The main weapon systems are online, and our shields are back up to 60%. We should be able to handle their next attack," Alvarez nodded. Time was running out, and they needed to prepare for the inevitable retaliation. The alien fleet was regrouping quickly, and they would be coming back with everything they had. On the view screen, the alien ships had finally regained their bearings. They were no longer spinning out of control. Instead, they were positioning themselves into an advanced formation. The massive warships moved in perfect unison, their dark silhouettes creating an intimidating wall against the stars. Despite the damage they had sustained, they were still a formidable force. "Captain," Lieutenant Harris, the communications officer, said urgently, "I'm receiving a message from the alien flagship. It's encrypted, but I think we should listen in." Alvarez's brow furrowed. The alien fleet had not attempted any direct communication with the human ship so far. "Put it through," he ordered. The screen flickered as a deep metallic voice echoed through the control room. It was Zahn, the captain of the alien fleet, his voice dripping with disdain. "Humans," Zahn began, his tone cold. "You have proven more difficult to destroy than we anticipated. But let me be clear, this will not end in your favor. We have only begun to fight. You will not survive this encounter. Your resistance is futile." Alvarez listened carefully, his hand tightening around the edge of his chair. Zahn was trying to intimidate them, to break their resolve. But it wouldn't work. He had seen too much of humanity's strength to be swayed by threats. The human ship might be outgunned, but it wasn't outclassed. "Not yet, you're welcome to try," Captain Alvarez replied, his voice calm but firm. "But you've underestimated us before, and it won't be the last time." Zahn's laughter crackled through the speakers. "We shall see, Captain. We shall see." The transmission ended abruptly, and the room fell into a heavy silence. Alvarez's eyes were fixed on the viewscreen, watching the alien fleet as it prepared for its next assault. The time for words was over. The battle was about to reach its climax. "All hands, prepare for impact," Alvarez ordered. "Brace for another attack. This time, we take the fight to them." As the crew scrambled to their stations, the human ship's weapon systems powered up, and the shields hummed with renewed energy. The alien ships loomed closer, their guns charging in preparation for the final push. It was now or never. The aliens had the upper hand in sheer numbers, but the human ship had something they didn't: a willingness to fight to the last breath. Outside, the alien ships closed in, their weapons charging for the final strike. The human ship, though battered, remained defiant. The two fleets were locked in a deadly standoff, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Suddenly, without warning, the alien fleet opened fire. The space around the human ship lit up as energy blasts tore through the void. The human ship rocked violently as the first wave of fire hit. Shields flared with the impact, but they held, absorbing the damage. The ship's hull groaned as more blasts followed, each one threatening to tear them apart. The crew gritted their teeth, holding their ground as the alarm screamed. "Shields holding at 45%. Lieutenant Johnson shouted, his voice strained. "Return fire," Alvarez commanded, his eyes narrowed. "Fire at will." The human ship's weapons fired in response, sending powerful blasts toward the alien fleet. The beam cannons lit up the darkness of space, and explosions rippled through the alien formations. The crew had learned quickly to adapt their strategy, using hit-and-run tactics to target the weakest points in the alien ship's defenses. They couldn't afford to match the aliens' firepower head-on, but they could outmaneuver them. And that's exactly what they did. The alien fleet, now fully aware of the human ship's newfound ferocity, began to adjust its tactics. The once cocky Zahn was no longer laughing. His fleet had sustained significant damage, and the confidence that had once been so prevalent had started to erode. The human ship had proven it could hold its ground, and that was something the aliens were not accustomed to. "Captain, we've breached their forward shields," Lieutenant Harris reported. "The lead ship is taking heavy fire. They're pulling back." Alvarez's eyes lit up with hope. This was their chance. The alien fleet was regrouping, and they were weakening. But they were still dangerous, and the human ship couldn't afford to let their guard down. "Prepare for a coordinated strike," Alvarez ordered. "Target the vulnerable ships. We need to break their formation." The human ship surged forward, its weapons firing in rapid succession as it targeted the alien fleet's weak points. For the first time, the aliens found themselves on the defensive. Their ships were powerful, but the human ship was fast and unpredictable, striking where they least expected it. The alien flagship, which had once been the pride of Zahn's fleet, now appeared shaken. The human ship's relentless assault had taken a toll on its shields, and the once unstoppable warship was beginning to show signs of weakness. It wasn't over yet, but the balance of power had begun to shift. Zahn's voice crackled through the communication lines again, his tone no longer filled with arrogance. "You think you've won?" he sneered. "You've merely delayed the inevitable. We are a species beyond your comprehension. Your resistance means nothing." Captain Alvarez stood tall, his resolve stronger than ever. "I've heard enough of your threats," he said calmly. "We're not giving up, not now. Not ever." With that, the human ship fired again, its weapons ripping through the alien fleet. The battle had reached its peak, and the tides of war were finally changing. The aliens were realizing what they had not seen before. Humanity's strength lay not in its weapons or technology, but in its determination to survive. The human ship, battered and scarred, refused to back down. It fought for its crew, for its people, and for the future of humankind. As the alien fleet faltered, the human ship pressed forward, each shot another step toward victory. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, the human crew felt a surge of hope. They had faced the impossible and stood their ground. And in that moment, the alien fleet knew one thing for certain. They were no longer the hunters. The humans had become the predators. The air in the control room of the human ship felt heavier now, as though the weight of the entire galaxy was pressing down on the crew. The battle had taken a toll on them, physically and emotionally. The ship groaned beneath them, its systems barely holding together after the barrage from the alien fleet. The alien flagship was damaged, retreating, but the remaining alien forces were still a threat. The time for small victories was over. Now it was a matter of survival. Captain Alvarez stood at the front of the bridge, his gaze fixed on the view screen. The alien fleet, though weakened, still outnumbered them. They had taken a powerful hit, but the aliens hadn't been defeated. Yet, there was only one option left. How are we holding up? Alvarez asked, his voice calm but filled with urgency. Lieutenant Johnson's fingers moved rapidly across the control panels. Shields are down to 20%, Captain. Engines are operating at 50%. We've lost several weapon systems, and we're barely staying afloat. The damage is too extensive. We can't keep this up much longer. Alvarez turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Carter, who was monitoring the movements of the remaining alien ships on the radar. What's our status with the enemy? The alien fleet is regrouping, Captain, Carter said, his voice strained. Their flagship is retreating, but they still have 4 capital ships in formation, and they're preparing for a counterattack. They've adapted to our tactics. If we don't act soon, we'll be overwhelmed. The crew fell silent. They knew what needed to be done. It was a desperate plan, one that could either turn the tide of the battle or end it all. But there was no other choice. They had to gamble everything. Do we have a chance? Alvarez asked, his eyes scanning the faces of his officers. Lieutenant Harris, the communications officer, spoke up. Captain, there's one last option, but it's never been tested in battle. It's a risky maneuver, and there's no telling what it will do to the ship or to us. But it could give us the edge we need. Alvarez's brow furrowed. What are you suggesting? Harris hesitated for a moment. We can trigger the hyper-acceleration drive, push the ship beyond its limits. It would create a massive energy burst that could incapacitate the enemy fleet, but it would likely cripple the ship in the process. It's a one-shot gamble. If it works, we have a chance. If it doesn't, single quotes D, we're done. The room grew tense. The crew exchanged looks, each of them aware of the risks involved. The hyper-acceleration drive was a top-secret technology developed to allow ships to make extreme jumps in space travel. However, it was never meant for combat. The human ship was not designed to endure such a strain. Yet, in this moment of desperation, it was the only weapon they had left. Alvarez closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the weight of the decision. He could feel the eyes of his crew on him, waiting for his command. The aliens were regrouping, and they were coming back stronger than ever. There was no time left to hesitate. Prepare the hyper-acceleration drive, Alvarez said, his voice firm. We don't have a choice. Lieutenant Harris immediately began working on the controls. Activating the system now, Captain. Initiating the power surge. Alvarez watched as the energy readings on the screen surged. The ship began to hum with power, its systems straining as they were pushed to their absolute limits. It felt like the very hull of the ship was going to crack under the pressure. But they had no other option. They had to push forward. How much longer until we're ready? Alvarez asked, his eyes never leaving the view screen. We have approximately 2 minutes, Captain, Harris replied, her fingers flying over the console. We'll be able to engage the system once we reach full power. but the strain on the ship will be catastrophic. It may destroy critical systems. The engines may fail altogether. Alvarez's jaw tightened. He could hear the sound of the alien fleet reconfiguring in the distance. They were getting closer. This was it. There would be no turning back after this. They either succeeded, or humanity was doomed. "Ready the crew," Alvarez ordered. "Prepare for the worst. If we go down fighting." The tension on the bridge was palpable as the countdown began. Every second felt like an eternity. The human ship was readying itself for a final devastating maneuver. The alien fleet, which had been recovering from their earlier blow, was now advancing with calculated precision. They had learned from their earlier mistakes, and now they were closing in. They knew they could finish the human ship off with a few concentrated shots, but they weren't prepared for what was coming. "Captain," Lieutenant Johnson said, his voice tense, "we're hitting maximum capacity. The systems are near overload. We can't hold it much longer." "Do it," Alvarez commanded, his voice unwavering. "We've come this far. Push it to the limit." The ship hummed with energy as the hyper-acceleration drive engaged. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the ship, and for a split second, it seemed as if time itself had stopped. The ship lurched violently, throwing the crew off balance. The sound of the engine straining against their own power filled the air, and the walls of the ship seemed to groan under the pressure. "All systems are failing," Lieutenant Johnson shouted. "We've lost power to the secondary engines. The hyper-acceleration drive is destabilizing, but it was too late to stop now." The ship's forward momentum increased exponentially as the burst of energy from the drive propelled it forward at incredible speeds. The human ship tore through space, moving faster than it had ever been capable of. The alien fleet, caught off guard, was unable to react in time. The human ship, now moving at near-light speeds, collided with the alien fleet in a burst of fiery energy. The alien ships were scattered, their systems scrambling to adjust to the sudden acceleration of their surroundings. The force of the impact ripped through the alien fleet, causing massive explosions as several ships collided with each other, or were struck by the shockwave from the human ship. But the human ship was not unscathed. As the acceleration surge hit its peak, the systems began to fail in rapid succession. The ship's hull cracked and groaned under the strain, and sparks flew from several consoles as power shorted out. The crew fought to maintain control, but the ship was spiraling out of control, its engines now completely offline. "We're losing control," Lieutenant Harris shouted. "We've lost primary power. The ship is going to break apart." Captain Alvarez gritted his teeth as the ship continued to move forward, propelled by the sheer force of the acceleration. The alien fleet was in disarray, and the human ship had dealt a devastating blow. But at what cost? How much longer? Alvarez demanded. His voice strained as the ship trembled around them. "Less than 30 seconds, Captain," Johnson replied, his fingers shaking as he tried to restore power. "We're almost there, but we're going to lose everything if we don't regain control." Outside the ship, the alien fleet was in complete chaos. Several of their ships had been destroyed in the initial collision, and the rest of the fleet was scrambling to regroup. Their formation was shattered, and their command was in disarray. The human ship had achieved what no one had thought possible. Against all odds, they had dealt a crippling blow to the once mighty alien forces, but as the ship continued to race forward, the strain became too much. With a final shuddering cry of metal, the hyper-acceleration drive exploded, sending shockwaves through the ship. The human ship lurched violently, throwing the crew against the walls. Sparks flew from every direction, and the lights flickered out. The ship had done its job, but now it was paying the price. "We did it, ... Lieutenant Harris whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "We actually did it." But Alvarez wasn't celebrating. He had one last command to give. "Prepare for emergency procedures," he ordered. "We need to get this ship out of here, now." The alien fleet, though crippled, was not entirely destroyed. And the human ship, though it had dealt a deadly blow, was in no shape to escape the system. It had survived the impossible, but now, the real fight for survival was just beginning. And for Captain Alvarez and his crew, this was just the beginning of their fight for humanity's future. The aliens had underestimated them, but the humans had more than just their weapons. They had the will to fight until the very end. The aftermath of the human ship's desperate maneuver had sent ripples through the fabric of space itself. Captain Alvarez and his crew had pulled off something that seemed impossible. They had crippled the mighty alien fleet with their audacious gamble, but the human ship, battered and broken, was not unscathed. It floated in the void of space, its once pristine hull now a patchwork of scorched metal and damaged systems. The internal systems hummed weakly, struggling to maintain even basic power as the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize what remained of the ship. On the view screen, the alien fleet was in disarray. Several of their largest capital ships were destroyed or severely damaged. Others had collided in the chaos, their once pristine structures now shattered and burning. The once unified alien fleet had fractured, its disciplined formations now in complete disarray. Alien warships drifted aimlessly in space, their commanders scrambling to regain control, but despite the chaos, the alien fleet was still not entirely defeated. Their flagship, though severely crippled, was still functional. Zahn, the captain of the alien forces, stood in his command center, a grim look etched on his face as he surveyed the damage. His pride, the pride of his species, had been wounded deeply. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. "Report," Zahn barked, his voice full of frustration. "Captain, several of our ships have been destroyed. The remaining ships are struggling to re-establish order," the first officer said, his voice tight. "We've lost at least a quarter of our fleet, and our communications are scrambled. Our warships are in complete disarray, the humans ... They are more formidable than we thought." Zahn slammed his fist against the console, his rage barely contained. "I know that," he shouted. "But they will not escape this. We still have the strength to crush them." Despite his anger, Zahn's mind was racing. The human ship was damaged, very damaged, but it was still alive, still fighting. It had done the impossible. It had broken the confidence of the alien fleet. It had shown them that humans, despite their technological disadvantages, were capable of extraordinary feats. And that was something the aliens had not prepared for. "We need to regain our advantage," Zahn said, his voice colder now, calculated. "We'll regroup, and then we'll finish this. No more surprises. Prepare the fleet for a final assault. All remaining ships are to converge on the human ship. We will end this." The first officer nodded, but there was hesitation in his eyes. "But Captain, the human ship. It's been severely weakened. Their power is waning. Perhaps we should regroup." "And, no," Zahn cut him off sharply. "We do not retreat. The humans have made their move, but we are still in control. We will finish them off. Now prepare the fleet for the final attack." The first officer hesitated for a moment longer, then reluctantly gave the orders to regroup. Zahn's confidence was unnerving, but the truth was that they still had a fleet, albeit a fractured one, while the human ship had been pushed to its limits. Meanwhile, on the human ship, Captain Alvarez was in a similar position. His vessel was severely damaged, and the crew was working non-stop to keep it operational. The ship's hull had withstood the brunt of the alien assault, but the structural integrity was compromised, and many of the vital systems had been severely affected. The crew was exhausted, yet they continued to push forward, knowing that the battle was far from over. "Captain, we've managed to restore partial power to the engines," But we can't sustain this much longer, Lieutenant Johnson reported, sweat dripping down his face. Our life support systems are failing. The shields are holding, but just barely. If the aliens launch another attack, we might not survive. Alvarez ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They had dealt the alien fleet a severe blow, but it hadn't been enough to finish them off completely. The aliens had regrouped, and now they were preparing for a final push. How much time do we have? Alvarez asked, his voice grim. Not much, Captain. Lieutenant Harris, the communications officer, said, her eyes glued to her console. They're regrouping quickly. The alien fleet is preparing for their final assault. I estimate we have less than 10 minutes before they engage again. The room fell silent. 10 minutes. It was an agonizingly short amount of time, and Alvarez knew that this would be their last chance. They couldn't keep up this fight forever. The ship was barely holding together, and the crew was running on fumes. The aliens were coming back stronger than ever, and the human ship was in no condition to withstand another attack. But Alvarez wasn't one to give up easily. He had seen the strength of his crew, the determination that had gotten them this far. They weren't going to let the alien fleet win, not now, not after everything they had been through. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Alvarez ordered. We're not going to make it easy for them. We'll hit them where it hurts and keep moving. We've got one shot at this. The crew moved quickly, their exhaustion temporarily forgotten as they focused on the task at hand. The ship's systems were still operating at a fraction of their full power, but it would have to be enough. Captain, Lieutenant Carter, the tactical officer, said as he scanned the radar, the alien fleet is coming. They're converging on us. All remaining ships are forming up around their flagship. They'll be coming at us with everything they have. Alvarez's mind raced. He had no illusions about their chances. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and barely functional. But there was one thing the aliens hadn't counted on: humanity's determination to survive. And Alvarez had every intention of making sure that determination wasn't squandered. All hands, brace for impact. Alvarez commanded. We fight until the very end. We hold our ground. Do not let them push us back. The human ship surged forward, its battered hull creaking under the strain. The alien fleet was closing in, its warships lining up for the final assault. But Alvarez wasn't about to let them make it easy. With everything he had left, he ordered the crew to take evasive action, moving the ship in unpredictable patterns. To avoid the alien fire, the alien ships fired in unison, their weapons charging with deadly precision. Energy blasts streaked through the darkness of space, narrowly missing the human ship as it danced around the incoming fire. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the human ship might escape unscathed. But the alien fleet was relentless, their fire growing more intense with every passing second. We can't keep dodging like this, Lieutenant Johnson shouted, his hands trembling on the controls. We're running out of options. Alvarez's eyes narrowed as he watched the alien fleet converge. There was no way they could keep this up for long. The human ship's defenses were failing, and the crew was reaching their breaking point. But there was one last thing they could try. Prepare the final charge, Alvarez ordered, his voice steady despite the rising tension. We'll make our stand here. It's now or never. The crew worked quickly, activating the remaining weapon systems. The human ship's weapons flared to life, shooting powerful energy blasts at the oncoming alien fleet. For a brief moment, the human ship seemed to shine brighter than ever, its final attack a desperate but determined effort to bring down the alien threat. The alien fleet retaliated with full force. The battle raged on, each side trading blow after blow. The human ship, though barely functional, held its ground, refusing to give up. Each blast from their weapons was a testament to Kiska. The crew's resolve. And then, as the alien ships closed in for what seemed like the final blow, something unexpected happened. A massive explosion tore through the alien formation, causing chaos among their ranks. Several ships were destroyed in the blast, and the alien fleet faltered. For the first time since the beginning of the battle, the alien forces were on the defensive. Did we do it? Lieutenant Harris gasped, her voice filled with disbelief. Alvarez's eyes widened as he watched the chaos unfold. The alien fleet had been severely weakened. The human ship had delivered a final devastating blow. But there was no time to celebrate yet. The battle was far from over, and the alien fleet was still a formidable force. Not yet, Alvarez said, his voice calm but determined. We've bought ourselves some time, but we need to stay focused. We can still win this. The alien fleet, though shaken, had not yet given up. But for the first time, they realized that the human ship was not just a small, insignificant target. It was a force to be reckoned with, and the humans had proven they could go toe-to-toe with even the mightiest of adversaries. And as the human ship continued its final stand, Captain Alvarez knew one thing. They were no longer the underdogs. They had become the hunters. The universe seemed to hold its breath as the human ship, barely functional, surged forward once more. The alien fleet, though crippled, had regrouped and was now closing in on the last vestige of human resistance. Captain Alvarez stood at the helm, his face a mask of grim determination. His crew was exhausted, their strength and resolve tested to the limits. But there was no turning back now. The battle had come down to this final confrontation, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The human ship's hull creaked as the last reserves of power flowed through its systems. The damage was extensive. The shields were barely holding together, and the life support systems were failing. Yet, despite it all, the crew refused to surrender. They had come too far, fought too hard, and now they would make their stand. Alvarez stood before his crew, who were working furiously to keep the ship operational. "Report," he demanded, his voice unwavering. Lieutenant Johnson, his face pale and covered in sweat, didn't need to look at the console to know the news wasn't good. "We've lost our starboard thrusters, Captain. The remaining engines are running at 40% capacity. The forward shields are down to 10%. We don't have much time left." Alvarez took a deep breath, glancing at the viewscreen where the alien fleet was rapidly closing in. Despite the damage, the enemy ships were still a formidable force, their weapons charging for the final assault. But the humans had done the impossible before. They had outlasted the aliens' overwhelming power, and now they had one final chance to strike the killing blow. "How much longer do we have before the alien fleet engages?" Alvarez asked. Lieutenant Harris, who had been tracking the alien ships, quickly scanned the radar. "They're already within range, Captain. They're making their move. It's now or never." Alvarez nodded, a grim smile creeping onto his face. "Then let's make it count. Prepare the final charge. We take the fight to them." The crew moved quickly, their exhaustion forgotten as they worked in perfect unison. The human ship, though battered and broken, was still alive, and that, in itself, was a victory. The weapon systems were activated, and the remaining energy was channeled into a powerful burst. The ship's guns fired in rapid succession, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the approaching alien fleet. The alien ships, caught off guard by the sudden onslaught, staggered back, their shields flaring as they absorbed the blasts. But the human ship didn't stop. It kept firing, relentless in its assault. The alien fleet, though vast and powerful, was struggling to keep up with the unpredictable movements of the human vessel. The fight had become a frantic, desperate dance, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other. Direct hit on the lead ship. Lieutenant Carter, the tactical officer, shouted, "They're losing their shields." For the first time since the battle began, the alien fleet showed signs of faltering. The massive warships, once so sure of their victory, were now struggling to maintain their formation. The human ship, though crippled, was proving to be a far greater adversary than they had anticipated. Zahn, the alien captain, stood before his officers, his face twisted in frustration. He had watched the human ship deal blow after blow to his fleet, and now it seemed as if the tables were turning. His confidence, once unshakable, was beginning to crumble. He had thought this war would be over in a matter of hours, but now, it was clear that humanity was not going down without a fight. "Captain, we're losing ground," the first officer said urgently. "The human ship is unpredictable. We cannot anticipate their movements. If we don't act fast, we could lose everything." Zahn clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had never considered the possibility of defeat, but now it was staring him in the face. The human ship had pushed back, his forces with sheer determination. There was only one option left. "Full speed ahead," Zahn commanded, his voice cold and resolute. "We will crush them. We will show them what true power is." The alien fleet surged forward, its remaining warships firing everything they had left. The weapons blasts lit up the dark expanse of space as the aliens closed in on the human ship. But the human ship wasn't finished yet. With what little power it had left, it veered sharply to the left, dodging the incoming fire and returning with deadly accuracy. "Shields at 5%, Lieutenant Johnson shouted. "We can't take much more of this." Alvarez gritted his teeth, watching the alien ships as they closed in. The alien fleet had the numbers, the firepower, and the resources. But the human ship had something the aliens didn't: the will to survive. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Alvarez ordered. "We're not done yet." The human ship twisted and turned, dodging the alien fire with expert precision. The alien ships, though powerful, were slow to react. The human ship's agility, though compromised, allowed it to land another hit on the lead alien ship. "Direct hit to the engines," Lieutenant Harris yelled. "They're losing power." The alien fleet, once so confident, was now on the defensive. The human ship had managed to deliver another crippling blow. Zahn, watching from his flagship, could feel his frustration mounting. His fleet was faltering, and the human ship, though battered, was still fighting back. "This is not possible," Zahn shouted, his fists clenched in anger. "How are they still fighting? How?" Despite the alien fleet's best efforts, the human ship refused to back down. The crew, though exhausted and battered, was determined to see this through. The final charge had bought them some time, but the battle was far from over. The human ship, though crippled, had proven one thing: the will to fight could overcome any obstacle. As the battle raged on, the alien fleet continued to fire, but their attacks were becoming less coordinated. They were out of sync, struggling to regroup and retaliate. And it was in this moment of disarray that the human ship struck its final blow. With the last of its energy, the human ship unleashed a devastating pulse of energy, targeting the core of the alien flagship. The pulse ripped through the alien ship's defenses, tearing through its hull and reaching the heart of its power. The flagship's weapons went silent, and its engines sputtered out, unable to sustain the damage. "We've done it!" Lieutenant Harris shouted, her voice filled with disbelief. Alvarez watched as the alien flagship, once the pride of Zahn's fleet, exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The shockwave rippled through the remaining alien warships, and for the first time, it was clear that the battle was over. The alien fleet was in chaos. Their command had been shattered, and without their flagship, they were lost. "Prepare to engage the remaining fleet," Alvarez said, his voice calm but resolute. "We finish this." But the alien fleet was already retreating. Zahn, realizing the battle was lost, had ordered a full retreat. The once mighty alien forces were now scrambling to escape, their ships fleeing into the darkness of space. Alvarez watched as the alien ships disappeared into the distance. Their retreating forms a testament to the humans' victory. The human ship, though battered and broken, had survived. The alien fleet, though powerful, had been outmatched as the final remnants of the battle faded into the distance. Captain Alvarez allowed himself a moment of relief. The fight was over. Humanity had won. But even as the crew celebrated their victory, they knew one thing. This was only the beginning. The aliens would return. And when they did, humanity would be ready. For now, though, the crew could rest. They had done the impossible. They had stood against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. And that, Alvarez knew, was something no one alien or human could ever take away from them.